There was a time when certain shows like Seinfeld were considered water cooler shows, meaning your colleagues at work would gather around the water cooler on Friday mornings to discuss the episode from the night before and laugh at the latest antics from Jerry, Elaine, George, and Kramer. That was, of course, a long time before Netflix. Nowadays, the conversation usually starts with, "Are you watching?" or "You should definitely watch." And oftentimes, what we watch defines us as an individual. For example, if you're current on all the Black Mirror episodes, you're definitely in the cultural zeitgeist. Yet, if you're still stuck on season 1 of Orange is the New Black, you need to get it together. Those truly invested in pop culture will know the latest meme associated with each of our favorite Netflix shows. Yet, truthfully, as much as we loved Netflix and chill, not every series is consistently a winner. In these cases, memes perfectly reflect our frustration for some shows. Below, we'll revisit the memes that show that some Netflix series make absolutely no sense. When we first meet Steve Harrington, he's immediately familiar. We've all known the cool guy in high school that was secretly hated by everyone. That was Steve in season 1. Yet, perhaps because the creator sensed that fans actually liked Steve, in season 2, he became the hero. The irony was that as Steve became more likable to fans, he became less interesting to Nancy, who turned her attention to Jonathan, a troubled soul that didn't inspire much sympathy. Finally, Steve went from the redeemed hero to all-around good guy, keeping the younger cast members safe. Strange progression, but ultimately, we're thankful for more Steve, in any form. When we first meet Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, we have no idea what he is. Is he a Terminator or a supervillain with untold powers? Yet, as time goes on, we see that Frank Castle, despite his undeniable skills, is just a man. An apparently immortal man, since the character is attacked with every weapon imaginable, yet always emerges unscathed. This is all great for a superhero series, but perhaps the creator should either make Castle a little bit more vulnerable or better explain his resilience. Either way, we'll forgive the flights of fancy since we love Jon Bernthal as the Punisher, and don't want the series to be unfairly cancelled like Luke Cage. Orange is the New Black, one of the original Netflix series, has given us a lot of memorable scenes, and we often find ourselves rooting for these convicts despite the mistakes they've made. The series is masterful when it comes to inspiring empathy, yet our sympathies don't always lie with the main characters. In the beginning, we understood Piper, and even accepted her fatal attraction to Alex, yet as time goes on, we have become more interested in other, more developed characters like Red, Crazy Eyes, Tasty, Dea, and others. Frankly, not only is Piper's infatuation with Alex tiresome, it also doesn't make sense. One minute, Piper can't possibly live without Alex, yet by season 3, she seems to not even remember who Alex is. Yes, Jason Bateman is a great actor and has played a variety of roles. However, there's something strangely familiar about his character on Ozark, Marty Byrde. He seems oddly reminiscent of his other Netflix role, Michael Bluff on Arrested Development. Both men have been forced to run from the law in one way or another, and both speak the same. You'll notice that Michael is endlessly frustrated by his family and is usually making comments under his breath. Meanwhile, Marty is surrounded by idiots and is frequently engaged in some nonsensical argument with one character or another. Sound familiar? Also, Marty Byrde sounds like an alias Michael Bluff would use if he went into hiding, just waiting for the rest of his family to pull up to the Ozarks in the Bluff Company stair car. Riverdale has earned praise for being original, self-aware, frightening, daring, and even addictive. Starring a talented and attractive group of 20-somethings as the teenagers of Riverdale High, the show has quickly earned a cult following. Although the show does tend to skew towards soap opera territory, some scenes even seem a bit gratuitous, namely those in which KJ Apa, aka Archie Andrews, appears shirtless. I mean, the show is filmed in Vancouver, British Columbia. Not exactly the tropics, but there he is, scene after scene, shirtless. Not exactly sure why I'm complaining when the fans aren't. Long live shirtless Archie. When House of Cards arrived on Netflix, it was a breakthrough for the streaming service. An exquisitely filmed series set in Washington that spared no expense when it came to locations, wardrobe, and A-list actors. Whereas Orange is the New Black took place in a relatively bare prison setting, where characters always wore the same thing and the actors were relatively unknowns, House of Cards operated on a whole different level. Starring Kevin Spacey, when he was still a well-regarded actor, and Robin Wright, the series was quality programming at its finest. Yet, as one of the network's first forays into television drama, how did they afford the show's apparent overhead? Easy. Product placement. Apple, BlackBerry, Samsung Galaxy, the online game Agario, Windows Phone, CNN, Budweiser, Coke, Dell, and Under Armour all have starring roles in the show. So much so that at times you expect Frank Underwood to turn toward the screen and say, "This scene was brought to you by Cialis." Granted, the disappearance of Will on Stranger Things was disturbing, but no less so than Barb's. After being ignored at Steve's pool party, Nancy's faithful companion is abandoned by the pool with a bleeding hand, never to be seen again. And while the gang endlessly obsesses about Will's abduction, where's the outrage for Barb's departure? It seems like the gang turns the whole world upside down, no pun intended, to find Will, but Barb is only mentioned in passing. After she is finally devastatingly found lying dead with a slug crawling out of her mouth, the attention shifts to Will, who is found alive. But what about Barb? No memorial? No mourning? Just momentary concern. Thankfully, her parents appeared in Season 2 to launch an investigation into her disappearance. But by then, we've all shifted our attention to Eleven and her ongoing meltdown, and Barb just becomes a footnote. She deserves better. Usually when a series revolves around upwardly mobile characters, they tend to feature brands like Apple, Lexus, or BMW. But what about when the character is down on their luck and cash poor? Well, in Jessica Jones's case, they use an ACER laptop. Jones, who drinks her sadness away and lives in one of the most depressing apartments ever to appear on the small screen, can barely afford money to fix her broken door, so it stands to reason she can't afford a MacBook. Yet, as far as product placement goes, ACER perhaps wasn't aware of how their wretched little laptop would be portrayed on the show, which begs the question, what's the reward? NARCOS is amazing on every level. The performances, the realism, the locations, and even the retro wardrobes. Yet there is one scene which leaves us wondering what happened in the costume department that day. The scene in question is when Pablo Escobar escapes prison and is found by soldiers in the woods in Season 2, Episode 1. In this scene, Escobar, who seems to wear the same outfit for most of the series, is shown wearing the preppiest nautical-themed sweater ever. Now, this is a guy who usually dresses like Homer Simpson, yet when he escapes prison, he apparently has time to stop at the mall and pick up a sweater at J.Crew. Given that the show bases most of its plot on actual facts, maybe Escobar was wearing this exact same sweater when he was found. Then again, it seems too weird and sticks out like a sore thumb. On Netflix's You, the object of Joe's affection, Beck, is obviously a free spirit and at times misguided, but her decor choices have left fans wondering, how dumb are you? The character, who lives in New York, seemingly has a great apartment that her father pays for. She also spends a lot of time going and eating out, yet she can't seem to afford one of life's most basic necessities: curtains. The first time Joe follows her home, she hooks up with a guy in front of her large bay windows without a care in the world, making it incredibly easy for her stalker to spy on her. She also parades around in a towel and changes clothes multiple times in front of the window for all Manhattan to see, yet never seems to be bothered by her lack of coverage. But as the meme above points out, she has curtains on her back windows, but none on her front, street-facing windows. What gives? Altered Carbon is another case of inadvertent whitewashing in Hollywood, though not as clear-cut as in the case of Ghost in the Shell and Aloha, where Scarlett Johansson and Emma Stone respectively played the parts in which the characters were intended to be Asian women. Altered Carbon has its own complications, as Joel Kinnaman plays the role of Takashi Kovacs, an Asian man inhabiting the body of a white man 360 years in the future. The problem that fans have found is that the original Kovacs, played by Wolverine's Will Young Lee, virtually disappears when Kinnaman takes over the role, whereas in the original book, written by Richard K. Morgan, reflected the Asian character's point of view. In the series, that perspective is lost, leaving the series with a simply white protagonist. In Daredevil, Vincent D'Onofrio is an amazing Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin, yet at times you're left wondering if the character is truly a supervillain or is just misunderstood. Granted, we get a backstory on Fisk, who is traumatized by his father's abuse of his mother and his subsequent murder at the hands of Wilson. Yet, as an adult, Fisk's relationship with his wife, Vanessa, is all sweetness and congeniality, with contrasts, a bit too starkly with the character's other persona as a criminal mastermind. This is most relevant when Fisk, who is undoubtedly a billionaire, makes his wife breakfast. Fans often found the contradiction of this baddie with a heart of gold a bit much. Noah Schnapp, aka Will Byers on Stranger Things, spent much of the first season in the Upside Down, but after returning home to Hawkins in season 2, you'd expect the character to have a bit more of an insight into what makes the Demogorgon tick. Yet, Will never loses that shell-shocked look in his face. Yes, he's able to draw an incredibly detailed picture of the monster, but he seems to never fully emerge from his shell. It would have been nice if Will came back stronger and ready to take on the evil lurking in the Upside Down. Unfortunately, all we get is this painfully shy graphic artist. Missed opportunity. True Marvel Cinematic Universe fans agree that Netflix seriously stumbled when it came to bringing Iron Fist to the screen. Compared to Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Daredevil, where the characters struggle with their own personal issues, making them more sympathetic, Iron Fist seemed to be full of himself from the outset. Fans have described the character as the poster boy for white privilege. On top of that, his superhero skills seem a bit lacking. Yes, he has an iron fist, but he often depends on acrobatic kung fu moves that don't seem to add up to much in the world of supervillains with superpowers. Might be acceptable if, like Daredevil, he accounted for his weaknesses, but unfortunately, Danny Rand is so self-centered that he wouldn't know introspection if it punched him in the face. Luke Cage, a great show, which by the way has a 94% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, was inexplicably cancelled by Netflix. Though the show was stellar on most aspects, it seemed to have one glaring fault that is repeated throughout the series. As most people know, Harlem is a neighborhood in Manhattan, just like Tribeca or Midtown. It is not a borough like Queens or the Bronx. Therefore, it makes no sense when they refer to the police department on Luke Cage as the Harlem PD. There is no such thing. It's the NYPD, just like a few blocks south on Park Avenue. To add insult to injury, the police cars on Luke Cage clearly say NYPD. So whoever came up with Harlem PD needs to double check their geography. We've already ripped Iron Fist as a character. Now let's focus on the show itself, which was beset with inaccuracies. Case in point, in episode 8 when Danny and Claire travel to Anzhou, China to attack Madame Gao's base, they apparently do so by traveling over a bridge from Jersey. Though it's understandable that the show wouldn't have the budget to travel to China to film a few scenes, at least make sure you're not featuring landmarks that are obviously not in China. Namely the Bayonne Bridge, which connects Staten Island to New Jersey. Yes, the CGI team tried to mask the skyline in the background by making it look like an industrial city from China, but the problem is front and center. Hell's Kitchen may sound scary to folks in Middle America, but in fact, it's a neighborhood on the west side of Midtown Manhattan that since the early 1990s has been gentrified. The area, which is actually only 15 blocks, is home to up-and-coming actors and Wall Street hotshots. Not exactly the most intimidating of gangsters out there. On Daredevil, the characters weirdly use the term Hell's Kitchen and My City interchangeably. Also, the area appears to be close to 116th Street, where Matt and Foggy walk to work, though in reality, it's nowhere near there. And one more hilarious geographical error. Matt says at one point that he's never been above 116th Street, which is odd considering the two law partners were roommates at Columbia Law, which is above 116th Street. Oh well, geography be damned. If you weren't aware, Veronica Lodge on Riverdale has a dad. You may have noticed that she mentions him a few thousand times. The reason she's in Riverdale is because her dad's in the Slammer, yet that doesn't keep her from obsessing about him ad nauseum. Everything seems to be linked to her dad. Apparently, the creators wrote Veronica on a whiteboard, and all they could come up with was daddy issues. So it comes as no surprise that when her boyfriend Archie's dad is shot, she assumes her dad hired a hitman to take out the small business owner. The Sinner is fascinating, yet maddening at the same time. The characters are a mess, and the show keeps going endlessly back and forth. And just when you have enough information to understand why Cora senselessly killed that guy, one massive plot hole seems to ruin the whole storyline. Considering we've spent most of season 1 wondering what the hell is wrong with Phoebe, Cora's sister, and why her mother is such an overprotective basket case, the ending doesn't make much sense. So Cora shows up at rehab and her parents want nothing to do with her, yet they seem to blindly accept that a terminal Phoebe is just living it up in Florida and make no attempt to find her. Sure, whatever works. At the end of season 5, we see Chang and Pennsatucky escape through the hole in the prison gate when the rest of the inmates are boarding the bus to Max. So when season 6 begins and the guards do a head count, it makes sense that the count is right, since Linda Ferguson effectively is counted in Pensatucky's place. But what about Chang? She has no replacement, or if she does, who is it? So the viewers are left wondering, are the guards unable to count correctly, or is there an innocent person trapped within the Litchfield maximum security prison? Netflix, you owe us an answer. Though many plot holes and inconsistencies can be frustrating, they're also fun to point out. You may agree or disagree with some of our choices, but we look forward to your feedback in the comments below. Tell us which memes you agree with and which you don't. Also, don't forget to subscribe to The Binger for more great content like this. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more great videos.